Hello everyone, my name is Alessandra. I'm a student at Creighton University, and thanks to the Creighton University History Department and the Center for Undergraduate Research and Scholarship, I've been granted an award to study a research project of mine this summer. The research project in question is looking at the way that people use spoken word poetry, also known as slam poetry, in order to interact with history. I'm a spoken word poet myself, and I am also a history major, so the two things just work out perfectly. The way that this whole project started was because I was really interested in seeing the way that people used poetry to interact with historical events and historical figures. One of my biggest inspirations, I suppose, for starting this project was going to the National World War I Museum, and they have a reflection room exhibit there in their museum where you can listen to songs, poems, and some speeches that came out around the time of World War I. So I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at that and a really important portion of history that people don't really think about. And then I started looking at all of my favorite poems of slam poems, and I saw how many pieces of history people were using. Sometimes it was major current events, but those events would become historical with time, and sometimes they were major events in the past. A lot of World War II poems, mostly because I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people. A lot of people's grandparents kind of lived through that experience, and so it's something that's really important to them. And so that was a really interesting thing to see. And so I started wondering whether or not this was something that had some meaning to it, whether or not people were using spoken word poetry as a way of interacting with history that we maybe haven't really seen before, or as a way that we as historians can use in order to figure out how to make history something that matters to more people, or something that people can understand better. So that's kind of why I embarked on this project. And so now here I am. It is nearing the end of June, and my project is starting to come underway. I should be getting my final official IRB approval within the next couple days, which is going to be very exciting, and I'll need that because I'll be doing oral history interviews. And what an oral history interview is basically I have a conversation with someone. I'm thinking mostly spoken word poets, but also just people who are interested in poetry or history, or hopefully both. So those are the sorts of people that I'm planning on interviewing over the course of this summer. So what I'm doing right now is actually testing a bit of my equipment. I got my audio recorder, my mic, and I'm testing my family's old video camera right now to see if these will work for my purposes. So far it's turning out pretty well, so I think it's going to be okay. I'll be heading to Chicago, which will be the first of my trips this summer for this project, where I will be initially going to the Green Mill, which I believe is a pub or a bar, one of those two, that is in Chicago, and it's actually a place where slam poetry first started. Slam was founded by this man named Mark Smith, who's actually was a construction worker, and he decided that poetry readings were a little bit boring, so he decided to spice it up with a little good dose of American competition and handed out scorecards randomly to different people in the audience. And that's kind of how slam poetry was born. And that slam is still running at the Green Mill, so the day after I get to Chicago, I'm going to be going to see it. I'm hoping that I also will be able to have an interview with Mark Smith while I'm in Chicago. I'm still in the process of setting that up, along with contacting some other folks in Chicago. At this current point in time, it doesn't look like I'm going to have a whole lot of interviews, but I'm hoping that at least I'll be able to see more poems that are performed by people, hopefully get an established contact with a few people who might be interested at the slam, and I'm really hoping that I'll be able to stop by the Poetry Foundation while I'm in Chicago, which is the place that Poetry Magazine is published from, as well as home to a library that has some, I believe, 35,000 books, either on poetry or that contain poetry. So that's going to be something really exciting and interesting, I think, for me to see. I'm hoping I'll get the chance to go there. So that's all that's going on right now. I'll be continuing to update more as things go on, and hopefully people will be watching this, stay interested. If you have something to say, if you want to get involved with this project, please leave a comment, leave me a message. I would really appreciate it. And now to close off this series, I decided that I would end each of these videos by reading a poem. It seemed appropriate. And I'm going to start off this series by reading a poem by one of my favorite authors. I'm going to hold it closer. It's called No Matter the Wreckage by Sarah Kay. She's one of my favorite slam poets, and probably the person I can either blame or thank for getting me into spoken word in the first place. And so I'm going to read a poem from this book called Forest Fires. I arrive home from JFK in the rosy hours to find a new 5-in-1 egg slicer and dicer on our dining room table. This is how my father deals with grief. 3 days ago, I was in the Santa Cruz Redwoods, tracing a mountain road in the back of a pickup truck, watching clouds unravel into spiderwebs. 2 days from now, there will be forest fires so thick they will have to evacuate Santa Cruz. The flames will paint the evening news a different shade of orange, and when it happens, I will be in New York City, watching something else on TV. Commercials, probably, which is all that seems to play on hospital television sets. The beeping from the nurse's station mixing with the sales jingles, the theme song for the ailing. My grandmother's tiny body is a sinking ship on white sheets. I hold her hand and try to remember open highways. It really goes to show that it doesn't take much with these dry conditions to start a fire, a CAL FIRE spokesman will tell CNN on Sunday. Fire officials have been working tirelessly, but controlling something this big is impossible. My mother will point at the celluloid flames, remind me how lucky I am, how close I had been, how narrowly I had missed this disaster. My father will point out a commercial for the Brown and Crisp, repeat line by line how it bakes, broils, steams, fires, and barbecues. He will write down the number to order it later. 3 days ago, I was barefoot, balancing on train tracks, the full moon, an unexpected visitor, the smoke-free air as clean and sharp as these city lungs could stand. 2 days from now, I will find my father making an egg salad in the kitchen, exhausted after an all-night shift at the hospital. I will ask if he needs help, and understand when he says no. I will leave him to slice and dice the things he can. My grandmother folds her hands on mine and strokes my knuckles like they are a wild animal she is trying to tame. She tells me I am gorgeous. Watches a commercial. Forgets my name. Tells me I am gorgeous again. My father watches from the bedside chair, his mother and daughter strung together with tightrope hands, fingers that look like his own, and somewhere in California, a place I once stood, is burning. So that was Forest Fires by Sarah Kay. I think it's a really interesting poem. Obviously, it's talking about the forest fires that happened in California a few years back. And this is kind of what I mean by people using poetry to cope with events in their life. This is a poem that may hold a lot of significance for people who are looking at the California forest fires, the way that people emotionally reacted to that event in a few years' time or in 100 years' time, who knows. So hopefully what I'm looking into here will help historians and poets too in the future. Thank you so much for watching.